Welcome to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. We discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we've got a handful of things to get into surrounding the Magic. But before we get into it, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and trying to become one of the biggest pages on the YouTube platform covering the Magic squad. So join the gang, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. With all that being said, let's get right into it. Starting off, today's pretty light on the news. Couple interesting nuggets of information to kind of go through, but still some stuff that I thought would be kind of interesting to share with you guys. Number one being an article that I read from Sports Illustrated talking about an interesting figure they could pick up on the veteran minimum market, being Jae Crowder, the double-digit veteran. I believe he's I think he's been in the league 13 years now. Jae Crowder, veteran presence, physicality, known more so for his defensive three-point shooting acumen on the wing side. A guy who could add some real three-point shooting and defense to a team that already has forged a real philosophy around being a team that, despite being so young, definitely guards at a high level. Wing depth in particularly, I would say at the three is a really interesting spot right now because you mainly have Franz Wagner and you have Tristan da Silva. Beyond that, there's not too much wiggle room besides maybe bumping Paolo Banchero up to the three or playing some more three-guard lineups where maybe you have Tyus Jones, Desmond Bane, and Jalen Suggs all in at the same time, with Jalen Suggs, who's probably your best defender of that group, not probably, is your best defender of that group, playing the three, or having somebody like Anthony Black at 6'5" slide down and play the three for you in a small ball situation. But as far as a traditional lineup is concerned, your only two true traditional threes on this Orlando Magic squad, Franz Wagner and Tristan da Silva. Bringing in a guy like Jae Crowder wouldn't be a bad pick. Obviously, the biggest thing for him was he needs to be able to knock down the three. Similar to the KCP situation, it's all about what you get. It's all about what you will be getting from that player from a productivity standpoint, not the philosophy of what he brings to the table. The philosophy of of a guy like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was great for what the Orlando Magic needed. 38, 39% three-point shooter, guy who was a high-level defender. That's exactly what the Orlando Magic needed. Veteran presence, the whole shebang. Everything I just said about Jae Crowder, that's what Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was, or was supposed to be. Obviously, he wasn't nearly as productive. I think he shot around 34% from beyond the arc last season. Was not as high-level a defender. Really hurt the team. If Jae Crowder, as a third wing, can fill in 12 to 14 minutes a night, hit the three at 36 to 38% from beyond the arc. We talking 5-6 attempts per game because that's like his main shot is just shooting the three. Maybe he averages 5 to 6 shots per game, but they're all threes, right? And he kind of undertakes a PJ Tucker in Milwaukee role, not necessarily being a corner three specialist, but a guy who just comes in, plays defense, guards his tail off on both across 94 feet, and shoots the three at a high clip and catch and shoot situations. Stands there and just acts as a 3-point threat. If Jae Crowder could do that, as opposed to a guy like KCP, who in some instances the Orlando Magic were asking to attack closeouts with the ball in his hands, stuff like that. I think if Jae Crowder could just be a guy who can shoot off the catch, hit it at a high rate, and guard at a good pace against some of the better wings in the Eastern Conference this season, I actually think he would be a pretty solid pickup for the veteran minimum. You guys let me know in the comment section down below how you guys would feel about a guy like Jae Crowder on the team. And if not Jae Crowder, the veteran minimum, pretty feasible these days and a really interesting number to get to because the Orlando Magic don't need to cut too much salary to be able to give somebody on the open market something slight. It's why we had the conversation about guys like Victor Oladipo and Russell Westbrook, who are still openly on the free agent market as well right now. So you guys let me know down in the comment section down below, would Jae Crowder be a kind of guy that fits on this Orlando Magic team, or is there somebody else out in free agency that you think would be a little bit more interesting? An interesting thing about the open market when it comes to free agency is a player on our roster that could determine the ability to go after another, significant name on the open market, even if it is with a veteran minimum, is Jett Howard. Obviously, we've had conversations on this podcast a handful of times because I've said that, me personally, I am not the biggest Jett Howard fan. And reports say that the most crucial day for Jett Howard is October 31st. This is because this is the threshold for which the Orlando Magic are, at the latest, able to pick up his team option for this year. Obviously, if they don't pick up the team option, he's still signed through this season, and I believe then they would, have to have conversations about a rookie contract extension sometime later on in the year. But the reason why October 31st is so important is particularly because when you look at the landscape of what the Orlando Magic have built roster-wise, specifically with their depth at the guard position, bringing in Tyus Jones, drafting Jace Richardson, and of course trading for Desmond Bane, already having Jalen Suggs on the team, having Anthony Black on the team, this could be a determining factor right here. Whether or not they pick up his club option will be a determining factor as to whether or not Jett Howard plays on this team really at all during the 2025-2026 regular season. I genuinely believe that if they don't pick up his option, it's because they have a true intention to move off of him before training camp. Or not before training camp, before opening night, excuse me. This is a guy who I think has upside. I've said this on the podcast before. I believe he has upside. I believe he has the ability to be a knockdown three-point shooter. My fear is that he can't do anything else at a high level. My fear really is, what's the best way to put it? My fear is that he's not really better than Jace Richardson, and at that point, there's a cost control that you already have over Jace Richardson compared to Jett Howard, who you are soon going to have contract extension talks with very soon. Why stunt the potential growth of a guy like Jace Richardson, who I think has a higher ceiling, really even a higher floor, just based off his ability to put the ball on the floor better than a guy like his Michigan counterpart, because, Jace Richardson, Michigan State, Jett Howard, Michigan. Jett Howard, high-level three-point shooter, hasn't proven it in the league just yet, but a guy who was always kind of considered as a knockdown three-point shooter in college. Jace Richardson, knockdown three-point shooter with the ability to actually play the point guard position and be a legitimate ball handler. Why stunt the growth of a guy like Jace Richardson in favor of giving Jett Howard another chance, when in reality, cost control-wise, Jace Richardson is favored. Skill set-wise, the floor for Jace Richardson is higher. And from the specialist perspective of knocking down the three ball, obviously Jace has to prove it in the league. But their scout was the same. So they're both considered knockdown three-point shooters. Jace is just a better prospect. I think Jett Howard, spooky season, October 31st, for those who didn't realize. Also Halloween, could be a spooky day for Jett Howard, who could be very fearful for his long-term positioning with the Orlando Magic. Could be a real chance that come mid-November, Jett Howard's wearing a different jersey. You guys let me know in the comment section down below. Do you think Jett Howard will play for the Orlando Magic in 2026? Because I genuinely believe that the Orlando Magic could consider trading him. I don't necessarily know if it'll be right after October 31st. How long do you think Jett Howard will last on this roster? I don't think he makes it into the new year. I honestly would be surprised if he makes it out of November on this team. And obviously, the October 31st club option pickup date is going to be a good representation of what the Orlando Magic think as regards to Jett Howard's future as well. Next up, we've talked about this on the podcast before, but he officially signed with the Atlanta Hawks. Caleb Houstan signs with the Hawks, and Magic fans are in between about it. They obviously want to see him thrive. They want to see him play minutes. And I saw a comment that said, he's going to be one of the hardest workers in the gym day one. I saw a lot of very positive comments around what Caleb Houstan should and will be able to bring to a team like the Atlanta Hawks. Obviously, as a team that we're going to see a ton this upcoming season, and a team that we are being shipped with a pretty decent amount as the squad to watch out for here and there on different publications. That means we're also going to be able to see a good amount of Caleb Houstan. Obviously, most fans wish him the best and want to see him thrive in a situation where he can get more minutes and actually get real on-ball reps. Are the Atlanta Hawks that team? I still am in between about that. I think he very much is the backup small forward for that team pretty definitively behind Zachary Richichet. I think it also depends on how they decide to line up their lineup. Is Jalen Johnson their starting three, Kristaps at the four, Onyeka Okongwu with the five, and then Zachary Richichet off the bench. If that's how they choose to do it, kind of makes the situation with Caleb Houstan a little bit different. Could he play the two? Potentially. But they just brought in Nickeil Alexander-Walker to be your backup too. So it's going to be an interesting pathway for Caleb Houstan. We wish the best for him. Magic fans seem to be very excited for him being able to have a real chance. Yes, he's still in the Eastern Conference. Yes, he's on a team that could be considered as a real opposition for the Orlando Magic this upcoming season. But at the same time, man, he was a guy that, in reality, right, really did fit what the Orlando Magic want in a wing prospect. The Orlando Magic also do genuinely need the wing depth, as I mentioned earlier, talking about Jae Crowder, to have a knockdown three-point shooter that can guard on the perimeter, guard 1 through 3 on the perimeter, sometimes scale up to a 4 in certain small ball situations. Caleb Houstan did fit the bill for what the Orlando Magic want and need in a small forward on this team behind Franz Wagner. Unfortunately, they just need a knockdown three-point shooter at the guard position on the perimeter that can also create his own shot just as much. And acquiring Desmond Bane made it where financially somebody like Caleb Houstan unfortunately had to take the fall with that. Caleb Houstan, Gary Harris, so on and so forth, right? So we want to see Caleb Houstan thrive, just not any time that you play against the Magic. But other than that, hope he does really well with the Atlanta Hawks, and I think that he does have a real decent pathway to playing real minutes, and I think he could be a real contributor on that team as well. Last but not least, there's a little interesting nugget here. Marcus Morris, a pretty consistent guest slash co-host on Shaq's podcast. They had a conversation that ended up touching on Paolo Banchero, and he essentially said that Banchero gives off Carmelo Anthony vibes in terms of the way he plays with physicality, size, mid-range shooting ability from a guy that is able to actually thrive within the 14 to 15 foot area. A dude who is able to kind of impose his will as a driver. A guy who is able to put the ball on the floor and really just self-generate in a way that forces you to have to guard him across all 3 to 5 levels of the floor. Yes, there's around the paint, there's the mid post area, there's true mid-range, there's further than mid-range but still operating within the arc, and then there's obviously the three-point line. And the idea of Carmelo Anthony, obviously Hall of Famer Carmelo Anthony, and now NBC analyst Carmelo Anthony, is a guy that's been known to be not only one of the greatest scorers of all time, and a guy who was able to do it at all 5 levels of offense in terms of generating your own shot in different ways. And Paolo Banchero, if he's also able to increase that three-point shooting acumen, could be a guy that develops in that similar way, because he's a guy who's already a high-level finisher and gets to the free throw line at a high rate. He's a guy on the low post you can trust to be able to operate against bigs, 4s, and 5s on the block. He's a guy that in the mid-range and high mid-range area is becoming a little bit more dependable as a shooter. And then that three-point shot comes along. All of a sudden, he's a guy who's a 5-way demon. We've seen this production before from another player who has actually worked out with Carmelo Anthony a ton. That's Julius Randle. Julius Randle came out of Kentucky. It was initially a bruiser type. He was more of a bruiser type power forward. Operated very similar to guys like Al Jefferson, Zach Randolph, those type of players, right? And he slowly but surely has developed into a guy who has added a more than just a low post bull rush the basket player. He's a guy who now has a mid-range shot. He's a guy who can now take players off the dribble. He's a guy who now can step out to the 3 and shoot 36% from beyond the arc. This is what Julius Randle has slowly but surely developed into. Part of that actually came with training over the course of a summer or two with Chris Brickley and ironically enough, Carmelo Anthony. I think that Paolo Banchero has the chance to develop very similarly as a guy who I think has worked with Chris Brickley as well into that 5-level layer scorer. And if he does that, again, I think sky's the limit for Paolo Banchero. And I've said a handful of times that I believe that he's a top 5 player at the power forward position already, and a guy that I think might be on the inside of top 20 in the league as of right now and has the chance to play himself into the MVP conversation and then top 12, top 15 conversation this upcoming season. I have really high hopes for Paolo Banchero. If you guys could comp Paolo Banchero with any player in NBA history, whether it's a former Orlando Magic player or somebody just across NBA talent in general, who would that player be? I'm interested to hear the comps. Carmelo Anthony was a really interesting one by Morris. Shout out to him. But there's a couple of other interesting names that I think you probably could throw out there at some point. And I'm interested to see what you guys think, having the chance to kind of like scour the internet and think of players that might be good guys to put in the same company as Paulo Banchero or vice versa, right? But with that all being said, this has been another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. As usual, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys tomorrow with another Orlando Magic update. But until then, peace.